usually avoid talking just before a tea break or a coffee break, and I think I'm holding people back from a much more important beverage. So I'll make it very quick. And I think we have one more session after this. We'll do it as quickly as possible. And as we get late, if there are any questions, we'll take it offline so that we can wrap up as quickly as possible. Okay, people want to scan the QR code? First things first. All right, so quickly, right? So I'm not going to talk about AI. I'm not going to talk about ML. I'm just going to talk, and I said nothing about aviation. We'll just talk about, as a CIO, how it evolves. A lot of it is from my experience. Your mileage may vary, but, right? The key point is the role of the CIO is evolving, right? Because today, a CIO is expected not just to be a tech leader. You're expected to be a financial whiz kid. You're expected to be a strategy consultant. You are expected to be a HR person. You're expected to be a legal eagle, meaning that, a lot of contract. So the portfolio of a CIO is evolving where just the tech capabilities are no longer sufficient. And this is the starting point because as the role evolves, each of these things become super critical, right? Just to give you and not just those skills, the coordination and managing stakeholders become super important. Most of you will realize, either if you're a CIO or in the path to being a CIO, managing your senior executive management in terms of getting their buy-in in terms of what you're doing, managing your business partners, how do you get them to adopt technology, your team members, how do you get them to kind of operate at the fast-changing pace. And for those who missed out, you can scan the QR code again. And I believe because it's running late, we have double points. So if you scan it twice, you get double points. Right? And of course, you have to also deal with vendors and ecosystem partners. So one of the key things, skills we talk about for being a CIO, right? We talked about financial acumen. We talked about strategy consultant. I also believe that every CIO needs to be at least a parent of 2 teenage children. Because you have to learn to tell people no when their life depends on it because you said no. Usually my business partners come and say, I want this. I have to tell them, no, you can't do that. Can you open up certain ports? No, we can't do that because of security. So you have to learn to tell people no. And if you have had 2 teenage kids, it helps. One won't suffice because one will complain. The second one will gang up. And which is what business teams do for you, right? So anybody who aspires to be a CIO, make sure you have at least 2 teenage kids. That's... Right? So I'm just going to give a couple of examples of how we ran through this. When you talk about a strategy roadmap, usually tell them, look, let's talk about a 3-year roadmap. And it's important because you have to talk in terms of the time horizons. And any vendors here, please plug your ears. You may not like what I'm going to say because the biggest challenge we face is vendors come back and say, oh, ye to hum 3 mahine mein kar denge, sir. Right? So we have to convince people that these things take time. This is a slow burn. So what we spoke about is, my first step is the building blocks I need to get in place to tee it up for what we want. Year 2, we talk about a path to excellence, how we come back and start building point solutions, how we bring in this one. And then we talk about thought leadership and being an industry bellwether, so to speak, in terms of tech. You have to follow this path in some form or shape. I mean, I said year 1, year 2, year 3. The more aggressive people can say quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, if that's how your executive management looks at it. But it is a slow burn. But the end goal has to be how do you get to best in industry capabilities globally. You can't benchmark against local competition. You have to benchmark global, right? And your strategy vision has to be that way. And one of the things I keep talking about is, as a CIO, you need to have a clear vision of what is. So it's like kind of when you get a jigsaw puzzle, usually on the cover you have a full picture and then you kind of start assembling the pieces. That big picture has to be very clear. Then you can figure out how those pieces fit in. But if your big picture is not clear, then you start getting odd-shaped jigsaw pieces that just don't fit. So always have a clear vision of the end state. Right? The one thing I will talk about is, and usually this is a sore point, is cost. Obviously, as when you try to push the envelope, cost is a serious concern. Nobody has unlimited budget, and this is where usually the CIO and the CFO fall apart. The key thing is, how do you drive a culture at keeping the cost where it allows you to innovate? And unlike what the BCG and the McKinsey people will tell you, when you look at your cost, it's not the big cost items that kill you. It is the long tail of slow burn that kills you. So from an IT perspective, you don't hemorrhage, you bleed slowly. It's a death by 1,000 paper cuts. So get rid of your unused Jira licenses, get rid of shelfware. So if you look at what kills your cost, because you can't do away with your ERP software. That's a big ticket item that's going to stick right up there. You can't do away with it. But when you try to control costs, it's always a long tail that you need to focus on, right? And pretty standard, pretty much everybody would have seen this. Over-provisioned infrastructure is a cost killer. Shelfware, in my opinion, that's the biggest crime committed on IT, is just shelfware, that you buy software that you don't use. Redundant and overlapping solutions. Again, vendor A sold you one solution which has one gap, vendor B sold you another solution. Now you find out that 40% overlaps. And essentially you have multiple tools that do the same thing. Not just cost, but it also creates confusion in your operations, right? Key thing is beware of hidden costs in pay-as-you-go pricing, right? It's very easy to come back and say, it's like how banks sell you loans, right? EMI is only 200 rupees per month. And then when you add the number of items, that adds up quite a bit. Just be extremely careful. I'm sorry, we have somebody from the financial services coming right after me, so I'll kind of reserve the judgment on that one. But be extremely careful about your hidden pay-as-you-go costs. And this is where the legal angle comes in, because a lot of these are not controlled by your usage, it is controlled by your contractual terms, right? So please pay attention to the fine print there. Another area of cost is lazy design. Effectively, you've got applications that are built that are not built robustly, and then you layer on solutions on top of that to try and make up for the lazy design. How many of you got burned by CloudWatch bills? Right? And then you'll understand what I'm talking about. Right? Fundamentally, logging is super critical. You build applications that don't have the adequate amount of logging. You throw in CloudWatch on top of that, and I've seen cases where my CloudWatch bill runs to 25% of my infra bill, which is kind of a criminal waste of money, right? And of course, you have mounting tech debt because you start layering solutions without designing it properly. And all of this goes back, when you start accumulating tech debt, you end up over-provisioning your infrastructure, and then the cycle starts all over again, because how do you overcome your tech debt? You over-provision your infrastructure, that goes back. So sometimes you have to stop and say, get rid of your lazy design, get rid of your tech debt, because without this, your costs are just going to keep going, and you will not be able to allocate cost funds where it's really needed, because you will not be able to innovate, because all you're doing is playing catch up. Right? Just to give you an example of how this cost is up, right? And this is just one example, and this is very popular because every time your CMO or CEO gets on a trip, they read up some article about how real-time analytics is just going to kill it. And what we will end up seeing is that real-time is expensive, right? Anything that you want to do in real-time is expensive. You can build a whole kind of data infrastructure, but the infrastructure you need for real-time analytics, real-time responses are super expensive, which means that you have to provision real-time infrastructure only for use cases that actually demand real-time. What is the point in giving real-time feed to somebody who's going to take a look at it once a day? In which case, you don't, and it's very cool to go back and say, oh, we do real-time stuff, but real-time is essentially collected and then somebody looks at it, a human looking at it at the end of the day is not really real-time, in which case you go away, because the cost differential between trying to do real-time and post-facto is super high. So I usually look at avoiding cost creep in 3 structures on data. We look at start to yesterday, which is what happened. And these are typically used for long-term analysis, trends, how do you spot macro trends and things like that. We look at live data, which is up to the minute, but that is usually given to a human to make decisions saying, hey, no, look, this is what it is. And you can on demand look at it saying what's happening. Typically in a commercial world, you look at how my revenues are clicking in, especially if you're looking at FMCG or in our case, bookings that happen live. The third thing you look at is event-based triggers, so that these are typically used for machine to machine, and this is really where the AI starts kicking in, because when you have event-based triggers running for machine to machine conversation, you cannot use real-time analytics with a human in the loop, because just fundamentally you can't have a human looking at something real-time. So be very careful in segmenting where you deploy your infrastructure, whether it is in any of these three, that alone, and then thank me later, right? The last one, what makes a future-proof CIO, right? I look at 5 things that you have to have. You got to be adaptive, which means that you need to be able to navigate through ambiguity, right? You got to be fiscally minded. The best laid plans of men and mice, if you run out of budget, no AI, ML, whatever project is going to see the light of day because your CFO is going to shut you down, right? You need to be influential, which means that you need to be able to shape not just war room discussions, but boardroom discussions. And you need to be able to switch between the two seamlessly. So you need to be able to convince your board what your vision is, and you need to be able to go talk to your execution team and get them on board, talk to your business partners, get them on board. Certain amount of visionary, you need to be able to look around the corners to see what's coming. And this is where, I think partners play a good critical role because they do have an outside in view. They can tell you kind of what's happening, pay attention to what the partners are saying. The last piece is, inclusive, because it's impossible for one person to hold all of this in a single human being. So the only way you'll succeed is if you start building these capabilities among your teams. You have to be inclusive. So stop recruiting SQL code developers. Start going to business consulting guys or ladies, as the case may be. Start hiring them because you need somebody to be able to sell the story. And if you don't sell the story, it's not going to take off. If it doesn't take off, it's not going to land. Ultimately, you're going to be wondering what happened, right?